Welcome. Glad that everyone is here. We're going to be talking about the advice visit. We've been doing a little check-in, but here's the overview for today. We'll talk about what the advice visit is, why it's so impactful, a couple of secrets to the advice visit, and then we'll do Q&R, question and response. So if you have any questions, be thinking of those. Feel free to drop those in the chat, and we'll have some feedback time for your top takeaway. So also think about what your top takeaway was from this morning. And we have a couple things coming up that we'll be happy to share with you as well. So I'm going to hand it over to our advice visit master, Kent. You want to just explain to us what the advice visit is?
Yeah, wow. So I'm just curious, and by show of hands, so just to get everybody limbered up, just put your hands up in front of your camera. Let's do some exercises. Everybody ready to go? Push-ups, pull-ups, whatever. Okay, we've got our physical exercise out of the way. Who would say that the term advice visit is presently part of your vocabulary, regardless of whether it's being applied directly to fundraising or any other realm? Show of hands. Advice visit, I think, and speak that language. Excellent. So it looks like, about 50-50. And in a nutshell, when I think about what is an advice visit, it's the opportunity to sit down with somebody else for the primary purpose of gaining insight into how something looks from their perspective, which may or may not be the same as it is from my perspective. And as I was preparing for this, I was just reminded, as I look back on my career, I believe the number one discipline that has advanced my career and my life is to use the advice visit. And wow, I wish it's something that I had mastered about 2 decades earlier. So I'm later to the game than I wish, but earlier than I might. And so one of the things, we're framing this from a standpoint of fundraising, but as I mentioned, it can be any dimension of life. And I want to encourage you to think in broad terms as we use this term, the advice visit. So somebody has shared this adage. If you haven't previously been aware of it, I'd say just lock in on this. If you want advice, ask for money. But if you want money, ask for advice. And certainly that can be offered in a way that's manipulative, and that's not what we're talking about. We're going to be using the terms authentic, sincere, and genuine throughout our 47 minutes this morning. But I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you made what I'm going to call a premature ask for money. And I've done that plenty of times. And somebody says, well, I'm not going to give you any money, but I will give you some advice, young man. So it's a long time ago. I'll give you some advice. And you better do this or you better not do that. So again, if you want advice, ask for money. But if you want money, ask for advice. And so just a little bit of framework. And those who have worked with us in the past, one of the frameworks that we use when it comes to fundraising is this 10-step staircase. And you'll notice the first 9 steps. So starting at the bottom and working our way up, we have 9 steps where we're doing something besides asking for a gift. And that all precedes step number 10, where we're asking for a gift. But if we're going to be effective, we're going to be asking for advice in those first 9 stairs of the staircase. And the better that we get at not asking for money, the more successful we'll become when it comes to asking for money. Now, this framework, the 10-step staircase, it's part of my first book, Asking About Asking. And if you want more kind of depth or detail, certainly would recommend that as a resource. Somebody said, where do you get the book? Well, you can get it from Amazon. But a friend of mine told me that on any given Saturday, at a garage sale in your neighborhood, you might find asking for sale, 25 cents, unless it's signed by the author, in which case it's only 15 cents. So get yours wherever you can find it. Okay, enough of that. So the question on the screen, what makes it impactful? What makes the advice visit impactful? And if you, as you have thoughts and questions, like Aaron mentioned, please drop them in the chat box. But here's what I've found. I was thinking this morning about probably the first time that I really implemented an advice visit in its best form. This was years ago, and there was a corporate leader. He was executive vice president of what at the time was probably a 100 top company. And I had met him. I don't think I'd ever spoken with him one-on-one. The closest I'd been to him was in a 2-on-1 meeting, which may have been the worst gift solicitation I've ever been part of. I have to plead guilty to that. I was getting ready to launch my own business. And beyond that, there were some specific things that I wanted to get his feedback on, his advice. And so anyhow, I called the guy up. Actually, wasn't even able to talk to him. I talked to his executive assistant. I told him I had a specific question I wanted to get his advice on, and if he would be kind enough to give me an hour of his time over lunch, that I would buy lunch. Now, I'll tell you, this guy did not need me to buy him lunch. But I didn't know any better, so I asked it. I set it up. And he was gracious enough. We met together. We met at the country club, and I planned to buy lunch, but you know who bought lunch, and it wasn't me. But my question for Charlie was, I noticed that you have a really close relationship with your early adult daughters. What has been key to maintaining that relationship, through the college years and into adulthood? Now, that was not his wheelhouse. That was just a part of his story and who he was. And I am so glad that I asked that question, and I'm so glad that I got his answer, because he gave me some input that helped build strength into my own life and relationships with my own kids. And so what makes the advice visit impactful is that we're asking somebody else for their most precious resource. Now, think about this. We ask people for gifts, and money isn't the most precious resource. With most people I talk to, they have something in their life that's even more scarce than money, and it's time. But that's not the most precious resource. Oftentimes, our advice is the most precious resource. And over the years, I've asked a lot of people in a lot of different stations in life, probably all of whom their station in life is way advanced from mine. And here's what I can't think of one time when somebody's ever said to me, Kent, what you're asking for is too precious for me to share with you. No, nobody's ever said that to me. People feel honored, respected, valued, seen, and heard when we genuinely ask for their advice. And so part of the impact is on each side of the equation. It's impactful on me when I ask. It's impactful on somebody else when they give, because they're being asked to give something that you can't find anyplace else. To me, that's a description of the impact of the advice visit. And so we build this as the secrets of the advice visit. So these are secrets, so don't tell anybody. Just go out and put them to use. Maybe they're not secrets, I don't know. Again, in the chat box, if you haven't already done so, we're gathering these questions. what is your question about the advice visit? And I think we've heard a couple of questions even before the call got started. So feel free to go ahead and drop those in there. But I'd love, first of all, just to ask Aaron, Aaron, what are some tips that you want to share when it comes to the advice visit?
Well, you already alluded to this, but the first one I would say is make sure it's sincere. You don't want to try to use this as a manipulation technique or something. So if you're going to ask for advice, make sure it's a sincere request for advice. Just a little bit of intentional thought beforehand, saying, okay, what advice can I seek? Should I seek? It goes a really long ways. And so and you know, again, don't have a second agenda. Let the advice visit be the advice visit, which kind of takes me to the point number 2. Limit your visit to advice. A lot of what we're talking about today is in the context of fundraising. If you're going to an advice visit and your guest ends up wanting to make a gift to the organization, I would say table that for another meeting, another time. Don't take a gift in your advice visit, because that's not what you're there for. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, it's being true and honest to your intent, which we've already spoken to, but also if you're there for advice and they want to give a gift, they might be someone that you would like to receive a gift from, but assume that they don't have all the info that they need to make a well-informed decision about making a gift. And so schedule another conversation for another time to make the conversation about a donation or a gift. And then the third one there, take notes. I think there's something really valuable about taking notes. One, it shows that you're paying attention, that you care, and you're being sincere about it. And it also puts that advice into a long-term storage device. Your memory, it'll probably fail pretty quickly. But if you take the notes, write it down, you're not going to forget. And then you can reflect on that advice, and that may give a little bit of that long-term memory, or also give some confidence knowing that you're not just giving lip service to the advice, but you're really taking it to heart. And so take notes, ask questions, and those are just 3 quick tips that I'd say you should bring to the table for the advice visit. Kent, you probably have a couple you could share as well.
Yeah. So, but let me ask you one before I share mine. Take notes. Can that be awkward?
Yeah.
How do you keep it from being awkward?
Well, I'm the king of awkward, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure I do. What I do, I just acknowledge it. I call it out for what it is, and I'll just say, hey, I'm going to take some notes here. Just so you know, I'm doing this for my own memory's sake. And if I pause to take a note, I'm paying attention. I don't take notes on my phone. I always have a piece of paper, whether it's a journal or a notebook, because that phone can be interpreted into a lot of other things. Even though I'm saying taking notes, am I really? So I do write out longhand when I take notes in person,
Okay.
and I think that helps take away that awkward factor as well.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I like about what you just said, to me, that's another form of being real. Yeah, the longhand piece of it. I'm just going to jot this down. Yeah, good. Okay. Hey, thanks for that. So let's see, what are some tips? Here's one of the things, and really, Aaron, this kind of ties back to what you started with, making it sincere. But my first tip is to be informed and be curious. So here's what I don't want to do. and let's show up and asks, this is in the fundraising context. I don't want to ask a funder for advice about something that is transparent and visible. Give you an example. I was talking to a trustee of a foundation one time, and this was a family foundation. Tom, if I mentioned which one, you'd recognize it. You might know who I'm talking about without me saying any more than that. But anyhow, I'm meeting with with one of the trustees, and of course, you've got all the stuff on the website, on their website, where they tell you what they think you want to know, right? And so, anyhow, we're going through this process, and I asked the guy, I said, I'm just curious, how do decisions get made for the foundation? And here's what he told me. He said, so my 4 brothers and I and my dad are all trustees. He said, we all have a vote. Dad decides. That was not on their website, okay? So that's an example. I was informed by looking at the information that was available, but I was curious about something that they would not put that on the website. And so, be really curious, but don't be what I call dumb curious. If you want to know, what's the relationship between these two people. If they want to be visible, it's visible. If there's some element about that's not, if there's something you want to ask advice about, be curious about that. The next thing I would say is be thoughtful and strategic. And if I was not being quite as polite, I'd just say, don't ask dumb questions, right? I mean, you've gone to the effort of going out of your way to ask somebody else to go out of her way or his way to have quality treasured time together. And so in advance, think about, what advice do I want to ask for? And then not only that, how do I want to ask? And this is going to sound perhaps really, I don't know, really basic, granular, but I think it's valuable for me to write down, what is the biggest question I want to ask? Write it down and then say it. Say it in my voice, say it in my head, repeat it until I'm comfortable enough with it that it can actually be conversational. So I'm strategic, I'm thoughtful, and then that kind of leads into this third thing, and that is focus on the heart before the head. We can ask head questions. What time is it? What's the weather today? Somebody just asked me, I was on a client call right before this. Somebody said, I've been checking you out online. She said, how tall are you really? I said, well, I'm 5'17". She said, so are you 6'2"? Well, at least. But anyhow, how tall am I? That's a head question, which frankly, nobody cares, doesn't really make any difference. But focus on the heart. And like I told in the example I shared, the thing was, how did you maintain such a close relationship with your daughters through their college years? He gave me some head stuff. And frankly, I'll just tell you, this is so long ago that the cell phone wasn't even a thing. Well, it was, but they weren't in mass use like they are right now. Here's what he told me. He said, one of the things we did with our girls when they went off to college, he said, we gave them a calling card. So you guys are all too young. There used to be this thing, calling card, and you could punch it in and make calls and didn't have to pay for it. I mean, dad's paying for it, right? But he said, I did not want anything to create distance between me and my wife and our girls. And so we made it really easy for them to have direct access to us. Well, I mean, that's all heart stuff. It's tied into some head stuff, but we started with the heart. So that's my thought. Start with the heart, focus there before you go to the head. You say, well, how did that work? How much did that cost you? Who do you use for calling cards? And that's after the fact. The real thing is the heart. So in just a minute, we're going to go back and do the Q&R, look at what's in the what's in the text box. And by the way, I know for a few of you, this is your first 47-minute webinar, but we're serious about the 47 minutes. So we're going to be done at 10:47 Central Time. If you have some lingering questions, you want to stay on for a few minutes, we'll be available for that. But just a quick thought to share before we go to the chat box. If you can't think of something authentic about which to ask for advice, you're just not thinking hard enough. So I would just say, have some fun with it. And probably the best follow-up advice I could give on that is start by doing something that seems really hard. You're going to have so much fun. It's going to be so rewarding. My guess is your only regret is going to be that you didn't start sooner or you didn't start harder. So with that, Aaron, let's go to the what's in the chat box. Let's take time for some questions, response as it relates to the advice visit.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat box. I actually have a question for Cassie because I love your quote that you threw in there. Do you know what song is that quote from?
I will find it. I think it's Tom may know it. I've got it singing in my head, and pretty soon it'll come for us, and I'll get it to you.
Okay, I assume you wouldn't sing it live.
Oh, come
for us
on!
right
I want
now.
Cassie to sing.
No, I saw that as the first thing. I was like, "Oh, I need to write that down because it's great to quote Kent Stroman, but if you can get some Pitbull in the mix, that's even better."
You can identify with your younger advice seekers and donors that way.
Yeah.
It is called Fill This Moment, and it also features Christina Aguilera. And
Oh,
so
great.
it's a little too old, but when I speak to college students, that are seeking careers in fundraising, this is what I leave them with. If they take one thing away, it's ask for money, get advice, ask for advice, get money twice.
That's great.
Awesome.
Thanks for sharing that. And Aaron, I was going to ask you because I wanted to hear it in Cassie's voice, and Cassie, you just did it. Ring the bell.
We're learning fundraising from Pitbull and Christina Aguilera. So having a first on the 47-minute webinar. Kent, are there any questions, like I would say universal questions that you can bring to the table when you're asking for advice?
Man, I hadn't thought about it that way. I think probably leads to kind of a universal. What has to do with asking for things from your perspective. And so, and by the way, let me give this caveat. I shared the 10-step staircase. The approach that we use in fundraising is what we call conversational fundraising. And we have an entirely different definition of success than what many in the industry have. The typical definition of success in fundraising is get the gift. Well, we take a different approach, and we say that true success in fundraising is helping donors make well-informed decisions. And we realize that well-informed decision may not include us for this for now. That's okay, because we're not in the process of extracting reluctant dollars from unwilling givers, right? And so with that in mind, it's a unique perspective. And I believe that every person has a unique perspective on something. And so that's one of the things that I like to look for. So let's say I'm involved in a major fundraising campaign. That's not just theoretical, but major fundraising campaign. And I have an opportunity to engage in conversation with Brianna. Is it Brianna or Brianna? How did I say?
It is Brianna.
Okay, I got it right. So Brianna, Okay, I'll give you a simple example. What's the correct way to pronounce your name? And she says it's Brianna. Okay, that's one example, kind of a pale example of an advice visit. But if we're visiting, I would say, Brianna, here's our organization's view of the future. We have a solution that we're bringing to the marketplace. Here's what it looks like as it's kind of formed up in this campaign plan. I'm curious, as you look at that from your perspective, what stands out to you? So that would be an
Actually ask it in kind of a different way. I mean, would it be possible to ask it more like, you know, we've had this campaign push. Now we're looking at the next part of our campaign push. We're looking for mentors. What is your advice? Can we do it that way? And just
that would be another example. Again, the key is, what are you looking for? So if you're looking for mentors, what suggestions do you have about where we might find potential mentors who would be in alignment with our organization's mission and priorities? Okay. Now, here's a caution I'd give us: if what we're looking for is money, not mentors, then talk about money, not mentors. And so another example of an advice visit for money would be, in this stage of the campaign, our primary focus is on donors who might give someplace in the range between $100,000 and $25,000 over a period as long as 3 years. I'm just curious, as you think about that, do you have any suggestions about where we might look or who we should be talking to? So again, those are not necessary. I hope all those are adaptations of universals, but not kind of boilerplate rubber stamp. Is that, Aaron, does that check the box at all?
Yeah, I think you're right on. You know, and Cassie dropped a comment in the chat box. Seems inauthentic to lead with an advice visit if you don't yet know your prospect, donor, volunteer. So if this were your first discovery visit, how might you seek advice? You want to address that, or you want me to take the first swing?
Yeah, you go first, Aaron.
You know, if it's a first visit, I probably wouldn't call it an advice visit, but just a relationship builder. Hey, let me just get to know you. There might even be let me introduce you to the project or what we're up to at the organization. You know, that may be a little more appropriate for the context of the relationship. And you got to take in that context as well. If you don't know someone, you probably want to get to know someone first to even know whether or not you want their advice. There's some people you may not want their advice at all, and you got to figure that out. And again, this is you know, make the visit about what it is. And so an introductory conversation, we teach this in the Asking Academy. The first couple conversations, we're not asking for a gift. Even if it's a potential donor, we are getting to know each other, building the relationship. We do have an emphasis on a relationship over transaction, and there's a huge value in even just stating that up front. Hey, I know you've given to the organization in the past, or I'm in a development role in my organization, but I just want to let you know today, I'm not going to ask for a gift. I just want to get to know you. That relieves a lot of unspoken pressure, and then it really helps people kind of loosen up, and it's okay, if we're going to focus on getting to know each other, we can do that, and we will do that. And even in those conversations, if they say, you know what, this has been great, you are in development, I want to give you a gift, I would still defer to another meeting. Hey, that's not what I'm here for today. You know, let's set up another time where we can hone in on that, because I think there's some more information that you would appreciate before making a decision like that. Can I get on your calendar? So that's it for me. One of the questions I like to ask, when, you know, if that I'll just bring to the table as a generic question is, especially if I'm meeting with someone who's further down the road than I am in life, I'll ask the question, hey, if you could look back at yourself when you're in the phase of life that I'm in, I'm currently a father of 2 teenagers and in my early 40s. What advice would you give yourself? And that question really opens up a lot of doors and sometimes hits the heart as well. And man, that's one I'll take notes on, because it's like free wisdom right there. I mean, and you're often surprised at experiences that question will reveal, and just the good old fashioned advice that I'm like, okay, maybe I need to apply that to my life. So there's a freebie out there. Clarity asked the question, I missed steps 8, 9, and 10 on your pyramid. Can you briefly talk about the pyramid? Talk about those 10 steps. You want to go back to slide 4 and hit that real quick. 10-step staircase.
There it is. Yeah, so good question. And Clarity, thanks for raising that. On step number 8 on the staircase, we're asking about naming. We're not asking for naming, but we're just asking about it. On step number 9, we're asking about deciding. And in fact, the example I gave would be one of those, I'm curious when it comes to decision making at the foundation, how does that work? And, everybody has a vote, but dad decides. And then number 10, we're asking for the gift. That is, when we talk about the ask, that's the ask. And that's when we hope the door of yes opens up. And the other thing I'll just say real briefly before we move to the next question is, what we find is where this approach with the 10-step staircase is used, the yes is by far the rule. It's rare that we're ever going to hear anything different than yes. Sometimes it may be a kind of a reconfiguration or whatever. But one of the reasons is because early on, and Cassie, I'm going to go back to your question early on in terms of that discovery. On step number 1, where we're getting involved, or getting acquainted, that's where one of the questions we'll ask, could you ever see yourself being involved with our mission? Well, you can't ask that until you've introduced the mission. But if somebody cares not about food, they don't care about banks, they don't care about Oklahoma, they don't care about regions, then they're probably not going to be a good candidate for a gift to the Regional Food Bank of Oklahoma. But I mean, having already shared the mission, basically you're asking the question, do you care about what we care about? And if they don't, it's an invitation to excuse themselves, which is an invitation for us to excuse ourselves. But on the other hand, if they do, it gives us something to build on, something to climb on top of and go forward. So, and another thing I wanted to share, Cassie, in response to your question, a lot of times we don't know how to quantify things. And so one of the questions that I might ask in an early, you used it as a discovery visit, is I might ask something like this: as you think about your own charitable priorities in this next season, what is it? 8 year, 18 months, 3 years, whatever. As you think about your own charitable priorities, would you say the food bank would be one of the top priorities, coming in someplace at 7, 8, 9, 10? Would it be middle, 4, 5, 6? Or would it fall in the low category, 1, 2, or 3? So now we've given a 10-point scale, we've given some description, and somebody said, well, it'd be a high priority, but at the lower end of the high priority. Okay, so you're talking what, someplace around 6, 7, 8? So again, just by using those numbers, and it doesn't have to be that, you do a 5-point scale, but that would just be an example of how you can seek their advice without even using that word. And I mean, I don't know that I've ever told somebody I want to set up an advice visit, right? But we're always seeking advice. And another resource, I didn't even have this on the slides, but I'm going to just share it right here. Great resource. This is called Leading with Questions. Michael Marquardt and Bob Tiede, Tiede. Bob has a blog post, Leading with Questions. Anyhow, great resource. He has some of the most masterful questions I've probably ever heard, and wanted to recommend that. Let's see. I see we've got another comment in the chat box from Milford. One advice question I found very effective over the years is to ask the person if they were giving the graduation commencement speech at ABC University or college, what 3 nuggets of advice or wisdom would you give those graduates? Wow. Milford, I wish I'd have thought of that, but I don't have to because you. Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. I can put that to use. Aaron, what other questions do we have? I notice we've got 10 minutes before we wrap up.
Yeah, a question I got before the Zoom call was, can you use the advice visit outside the fundraising context? And I would say yes. In fact, that someone alluded to earlier, but volunteers, if you work with volunteers, this is a great way to interact with your volunteers. You can even apply this at work. Hey, boss, I need your advice on something. And kind of in that realm, we like to use the 4-letter word and draft, and kind of draft goes alongside the advice visit too. But if you give someone a draft of whatever it is, it could be a gift proposal, it could be a promotion proposal, it could be a draft volunteer role, and ask advice and say, this is not a final product. It's a piece of advice that I'm looking for. I need some refinement here. What's your feedback on this? That's a form of an advice visit. People love to give advice and speak into things. I'd also say that even that in the fundraising world, if you have to submit a grant request proposal, figure out who the decision maker is, or who's going to be the first person to read over that, create a draft and ask their advice. Hey, this is a draft. I'm not submitting this today, but can you glance over this and give me some feedback? What am I close to your process? What is your department like to see before they approve things? Get that advice and get that feedback. And that goes a really long ways.
Good point. And let's see, Cassie has an advice visit tomorrow. Help finding storage space. Yeah, good enough. Might be worth more than money, right, Cassie? Good for you. Man, I'd love to hear how that goes. And hopefully there's at least one thing from today that you can put to use. Rondalyn asked to repeat the book that I just mentioned. It's Leading with Questions, and it's by Michael Marquardt and Bob Tiede, Tiede. So before we move on too far, I just wanted to come back and on the screen, let me kind of run forward here real quick. We've got some things coming up. Aaron, what's out in front of us?
Next month's webinar, The Art of the Handwritten Note. We're actually going to have a guest with us, Ashley Simpson from Cavett Kids Foundation. She does an awesome job at handwriting notes and getting real creative with donor stewardship and gratitude. So we're going to be talking about that next month. And we also have some Asking Academies coming up. We have the Express, which is geared more towards individuals. It's a virtual format on the Zoom platform, but where we teach the art of conversational fundraising. That's September 19th and 20th. So if you're interested in that, drop a line in the comments or in the chat box, or feel free to direct message Kent or I. And then we have the Asking Academy Classic. That's October 24th and 25th. That is an in-person event, 2-day event, and this one's going to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Teams generally of 4 to 6. Again, if you want some more info on that, we will help you master the art of conversational fundraising and get the entire team, both the board, volunteers, and staff, all on the same page. A lot of fun, really valuable. So we'd love to have you as a part of that. If you want to do a little research before reaching out, you can go to the askingacademy.com. And I think that's all the announcements we have.
Yeah. So one of the things that we like to do as we wrap up, and that is the your top takeaway. So I'm going to ask everybody if you'll go to the chat box right now and feel free to be as compact as you want. One thing that you're taking away from today's 47-minute investment that you feel like you can put to use in one way or another in the next 24 hours, go to the text box and or the chat box, put it in. I'd love everybody to be able to hear from everybody else. So I know we've got some people that are kind of on voice only. If you want to voice it, feel free to unmute yourself. We'd love to hear it. Who wants to go first? Watching the text box even now. And by the way, I see Rondlin says, interested in Asking Academy. Great. Tom Pitbull. Thanks, Tom. And thanks, Cassie. Number one takeaway. That's great. Let's see. What are some other ones there, Aaron?
Let's see. So I take away asking for advice rather than money will allow leverage and knowledge and experience of others and build relationships and allow to gain different perspectives. So that's a good one. Kelly said, intentionally making a list of contacts I can ask for an advice visit. Need to run. Thank you. Thank you,
Keep
Kelly. Focusing on the heart. And another shout out for Pitbull.
Wow. We got like 3 or 4 votes for Pitbull today.
I know.
Here's another one. Let's see. Get input on draft capital campaign case for support. Candace, go for it.
It's huge.
Cassie says authenticity is the most important. Has to be sincere. And man, I'd ditto that one for sure. Let's see. Milford, a pledge to act. Yeah, and we feel like that it's been a valuable investment of our time if it actually changes something for somebody. So the fact that you have a pledge to act, thanks for doing that. And again, would love to hear how that works out in real life.
Michael said, keeping the donation separate from the ask, steering away from accepting a gift during that visit. That's huge. We say the more time you give donors, the bigger gift it's likely to result from it. So if you can get an extra meeting from it, that's going to be a huge benefit. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So let's see. I think we've captured all of the top takeaways. And as we wrap up, I just want to say a great big huge thank you. Thanks for sharing your time, for enriching our time. And you can see it on the screen. We want to wish you every success in every advice visit, whether it's fundraising or something else, and whether it's today or tomorrow. Between now and then, if you have successes you want to share, please feel free to reach out to Aaron, reach out to me. If you have any snags that you run into, as I said before, if it's a hard question, Aaron will take it. If it's something easy, give me a swing at it. But we love being able to spend time with people this week. Thanks for doing that. We're 1 minute early Aaron, make a note of it. It's a 46-minute webinar.
46-minute webinar.
We owe you a minute. How does that sound?
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
See you next time.
You're welcome.
You bet.